violence and sexual situations. Viewer discretion is advised. In the 1970s, a young woman appears on a televised dating show. The answers from one dashing bachelor pique her interest.
Charismatic, great smile, obviously an intelligent guy.
What she doesn't know is that bachelor number one is a cold-blooded killer. On the outside, he appears to be a charming man with a penchant for photography. But on the inside, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Do you girls mind if I take your picture?
He's a devil. He's a devil himself.
Through the lens of his camera, he focuses on his next victims.
He was the perfect predator.
Need a ride to school?
He could disarm a woman. They'd fall for his charms, never sense that they were in any danger.
He takes not only their photos, but their lives.
Unspeakable brutality, psychopathic stalking, and killing his prey as if they were animals.
He liked to watch the light of life.
He slips through the hands of law enforcement again and again and stalks new prey. Meet Rodney Alcala, a.k.a. the dating game killer.
He's your classic psychopath.
A charismatic and highly eligible bachelor, until murder made him famous. During the 1970s, Rodney Alcala killed numerous women in a string of sexual murders. Police uncover hundreds of photos taken by Alcala that point to many more potential victims.
Rodney Alcala is one of the most prolific serial killers probably in the history of the United States.
It's time to meet our first three bachelors, shall we? The bachelor number one is a successful...
Alcala brazenly appeared as a contestant on a popular game show in 1978.
Many people know the murderer as the dating game killer.
When I saw that video and I'm watching, I said, no, she's not going to pick him.
So I'll take bachelor number one.
Bachelor number one.
And I thought, oh my God.
Rodney Alcala loved Rodney Alcala. He was the classic psychopathic narcissist.
By the time Alcala appeared on the dating game, he had murdered a number of women and served prison time for the brutal rape and attempted murder of an 8-year-old girl.
Alcala was his ability to disguise the monster within. I mean, he had this ability to put on this face, this charm, and you thought you were just talking to another Joe. You know, what a great guy.
In the years since, books, magazine articles, and television programs have examined the complicated life of Alcala and his sadistic, sexually brutal killings. Over the years, Alcala took hundreds of photographs. Authorities uncovered a stash of images secreted away in a storage locker.
Potentially, I believe there are dozens of murders that Rodney committed that have not been tied to him yet.
The haunting collection of photographs still baffles law enforcement. Police search relentlessly for clues that would reveal who the victims in the Alcala photos are and what happened to them. And the clues are as mysterious as the monster who took the pictures. Born in 1943, Rodney Alcala comes from a middle-class family with roots in both San Antonio, Texas, and Mexico.
He mostly attends Catholic schools. He's bilingual and he excels academically.
While living in Mexico, young Rodney's beloved grandmother passes away. It is unclear what impact this death has on him. His family life also changes when his parents separate. He and his siblings eventually moved to Los Angeles with their mother.
He was raised by his mom. He grew up in a clean house. He wasn't abused by anyone. He's one of these guys that really had every advantage. He had a girlfriend. He was a cross-country letterman. He was on the yearbook committee.
Photos of young girls. They also find the UCLA student ID of Rodney Alcala.
Rodney had vanished, so police started an exhaustive investigation. They were trying to get an idea of who Rodney Alcala really was.
LAPD detective Steve Hodel leads an exhaustive search for the elusive photographer. He starts by interviewing people who knew Alcala at UCLA.
And we're shaking doors and checking all last known addresses, and he's just disappeared. He's vanished. Talked to one of his professors at UCLA, and I said, we're looking for Rodney Alcala. He was a student of yours. We've got a felony warrant out for child molestation and assault, attempted murder. And the professor says, you got the wrong man. He says, Alcala was one of my best students. He wouldn't hurt a fly.
Both faculty and students at UCLA say they like Alcala. No one has anything derogatory to say about him, and no one knows where he is.
After he beat and raped an 8-year-old girl, Rodney Alcala moved to New York and started living under the alias of John Berger.
With a fake ID, Alcala enrolls in New York University Film School as an undergraduate.
One of his professors was Roman Polanski, who had just directed Rosemary's Baby. In a tragic twist, Roman Polanski would lose his wife, Sharon Tate, and their unborn child the very next year at the hands of followers of Charles Manson.
Alcala was a monster, but a monster with a pretty face and a nice smile and charm and intelligence.
Airline stewardess Cornelia Crilly becomes a victim of Rodney Alcala during his time in New York. Police find her brutalized, raped, and strangled body in June of 1971. Meanwhile, her murderer works at a New Hampshire children's art camp as a counselor under the alias John Berger.
Here's a guy who's on the run for raping and beating an 8-year-old child. The family has moved to Mexico. That's their way of escaping what had happened.
With the Shapiros out of the country, prosecutors arrange a plea bargain. As a result, Alcala gets a sentence of 1 year to life in prison.
In 1974, after less than 3 years in prison, a psychiatrist evaluates Rodney Alcala and finds him to be significantly improved. So he's released after 34 months for beating and raping an 8-year-old girl.
They could have kept him in for life, but after 2.5 years, a psychologist said that he no longer posed a danger to women or children.
It is maddening to anybody with a fair mind and to the families of those beautiful women that were murdered by him after his release. It's beyond shocking.
In a way, it doesn't surprise me because he was such a smooth talker. Not only does he manipulate 8-year-olds and young women, but men too. I mean, he just had that ability, and I could see him giving the shrink all of the right answers.
Looking at that now, in retrospect, I don't know what they were thinking, but by releasing Rodney Alcala, it resulted in literally probably dozens of people losing their lives in the most horrific way possible.
And so he went back out to society one more time to escalate violence and to work his craft.
Once he's free, Alcala uses his hobby to meet potential victims.
This was his thing. He was driving around. He was, hey, I'm a photographer. I'd like to take pictures of you. It was part of his ruse. It was a part of who Rodney Alcala was. It was all about photographs.
Photography is how Alcala meets his next victim, Ellen Hover.
Ellen Hover was also the goddaughter of both Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin.
While on a visit to New York, Rodney kills the socialite in July 1977. Her body will not be discovered for months. Rodney returns to Los Angeles, where in late 1977, Jill Barcombe from Oneida, New York, has recently arrived.
She was technically a teenage runaway, I guess you would consider her that. She was young, and it was the 70s, and she was not making the best decisions. It was probably 2 months before she crossed paths with this infamous killer.
She was 18 years old, so she was very young to be out in Los Angeles on her own. She had gotten caught up in the prostitution world.
She was an extremely attractive girl, so I'm sure she caught his eye.
And we believe that he picked her up on Hollywood Boulevard while she was working.
Looking for a ride?
Depends who's driving.
Just a nice guy who wouldn't mind having a cute girl in his car.
I don't get in the car with just anybody.
I could be awfully convincing. Let me give you a ride. You won't regret it.
Her body is found in her bedroom. She has been raped and savagely attacked with a claw hammer. Alcala's employer, the Los Angeles Times, frequently runs headlines about the murders of young women. Their killer's calling card is leaving the victims' bodies on hillsides in the canyons above LA. A 30-person police task force is set up to find the killer, who becomes known as the Hillside Strangler.
Because of the Hillside Strangler murders, police were interviewing all the sex offenders in the area, and that included Rodney Alcala. But his luck held up, because police had no idea that they were talking to a man who was guilty of another set of murders.
Be very careful of the smooth talkers, because they're the best manipulators. And if they're real smooth, that could be a good indication that they've got something to hide or they are hiding something.
Does the name Lauren Wagner ring a bell?
No, not at all.
Generally, the truth is the truth, and you get a sense when you hear it.
Can you recall your whereabouts on the night of December 13th?
And if somebody over-truths, you better be careful, because they're probably lying.
I don't recall.
Rodney Alcala did indeed kill Jill Barcombe, but authorities won't discover this for years. They will believe that Barcombe was a victim of the Hillside Strangler and not the man they're questioning. No longer considered a suspect, Rodney Alcala is released. This will prove unfortunate for Alcala's next victim, 32-year-old Charlotte Lamb. Her body is found posed in the laundry room of an apartment complex in 1978.
She was completely naked. She was posed with a long shoelace that was tied around her neck.
Welcome to the dating game.
It is also during this same year that Rodney is chosen to appear on a popular national television show.
By this point, Rodney Alcala had killed and raped multiple women. He'd been convicted of beating and raping a child. And yet somehow he ended up on a popular game show. How did that happen?
Alcala proceeds to rape the unconscious Monique Hoyt. When she awakens, she finds herself bound and Rodney sobbing.
And he started to cry, which is the only evidence we have that Rodney Alcala ever had any emotion, ever.
The streetwise Monique thinks fast in an attempt to survive.
Rodney, are you okay? You know, I had a lot of fun at your place last night. Could I stay there again? I think it'd be really nice if we could hang out there.
Yeah, it would be.
And that is the one person that managed to talk Rodney Alcala out of murdering her.
Monique Hoyt was only 15 years old, but she was really smart and found a way to bond with Rodney Alcala and gain his confidence. He unties her, and then they get in his car, and she waits for her chance to escape. And then it comes.
Gotta use a John. I'll be right back.
No problem, I'll wait here.
Detectives show Monique Hoyt photos of men matching the description of her assailant. She immediately recognizes Rodney Alcala. Rodney is arrested while Monique is taken to the hospital and treated for her injuries.
Rodney Alcala's mother feels like a terrible mistake has been made, so she posts his bond, and on March 16, 1979, he's freed from jail, waiting for his trial that September. So now he's on the streets and able to find more victims.
Out on bail, Rodney Alcala looks for his next victim, 21-year-old Jill Parento of Burbank, California.
Hey, ladies. Can I buy you a drink?
No, thanks. We're good. We're actually waiting for people.
Well, how about meeting me? Never been a freelance photographer before?
Some other time, okay?
Suit yourselves.
Got so mad. I said, 3 days? I said, how many little girls with long blonde hair disappeared in California that took you 3 days? And he said,
there was no hair.
Nobody could understand that somebody could actually do something like this.
When Robin disappeared, it was a huge media event in Southern California, and Rodney's probation officer out in Riverside saw this composite, looked at it, and went, you know what? That's our guy.
I'm calling about a composite poster that's been distributed. It looks like a guy who used to be on my caseload. He had a thing for cameras and little girls. I think he could be your man. His name is Rodney Alcala.
It's all beginning to close in on Rodney Alcala.
On July 24th, 1979, police arrest Rodney Alcala at the Monterey Park house he shares with his mother. Bail is set at $250,000, which is too high for his mother to pay. After a killing spree that's lasted almost 8 years, Rodney Alcala is finally behind bars and charged with the murder of 12-year-old Robin Samso. Trial occurs in 1986. The guilty verdict is thrown out on a different technicality, but as before, he stays in prison.
Because of appeals, as well as problems with witnesses and evidence, there are several trials. This means that Rodney Alcala's victims' families had to hear this horrifying testimony again and again and again. They were in hell.
I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. It's one thing even losing a child, but to keep reliving it for 35 years is...
In 2010, after DNA technology links Alcala to numerous murder cases, prosecutors from Orange and LA counties hold a joint trial.
We started getting DNA hits in Los Angeles County.
DNA found at 4 different crime scenes of murdered women in the 1970s matches that of Rodney Alcala.
For years, Rodney Alcala was able to game the system, but DNA evidence finally caught up with his crimes, and prosecutors used it against him.
The Los Angeles County cases are 18-year-old Jill Barcombe, 27-year-old Georgia Wickstead, 32-year-old Charlotte Lamb, and 21-year-old Jill Parento. All were raped and murdered by Alcala.
For 28 years, I had no idea who murdered my sister. It wasn't until the trial and being contacted by the Los Angeles Police Department Homicide Division that I understood through the miracle of DNA technology, they had a solid hit.
Almost 30 years after his first conviction in the Robin Samso case, Rodney Alcala stands trial for the murder of both her and the 4 other victims connected by his DNA. He decides to act as his own attorney.
I had a hard time really containing myself.
The trial is televised and draws national media attention.
Actress Charlize Theron is researching a role and shows up to one day of his trial. But she disguises herself and keeps a low profile because she doesn't want anybody to know that she's there, especially not the jury.
We, the jury.
After less than 2 days of deliberation, the jury finds Alcala guilty of all 5 murders.
To be death.
Alcala is sentenced to death, However, since resuming capital punishment in 1978, the state of California has only carried out a handful of executions. With a massive backlog of prisoners on death row, Rodney Alcala will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. In 2012, Alcala confesses to the 2 New York murders he committed, Cornelia Crilly in 1971 and Ellen Hover in 1977. To this day, police are still connecting Rodney Alcala to many cold cases, using the 100-plus photographs that were found in his Seattle storage locker.
A lot of these women, we have no idea what happened to them. All we know is they were in a vulnerable position, and Rodney Alcala used his charms to talk them into going someplace that he could have his way with them. I mean, since he was convicted for this, we have cleared case after case after case because of those photographs.
Over 21 women are accounted for through the photos, while other women and children are recognized by families as loved ones who have been confirmed missing for years.
Some authorities believe that Rodney Alcala had murdered up to 130 girls and women. We may never know the scope of what he did.
Who else did you murder, and where are the bodies? That would be my question, is who else is out there
that have survived all those years trying to hold him accountable for his actions? They are courageous, loving people who keep their loved ones close to their hearts. And I just hope they find some peace in the closure through these trials that they had not had, thanks to him, for decades.